a lecture 9 in our series English, Thought and Culture. Now, this is the start of a series of 2 lectures on what is all about English culture, or the culture of the English-speaking world, but is focused on the United States of America. Obviously this is more difficult for me. I am an Englishman, or I'm from Great Britain. I'm not from the United States of America, but I think it's important to look at how English culture was exported from the UK or the United Kingdom and went and spread across the world. Because maybe in lecture 11 and 12 we're going to talk more about the British Empire and the effect of how the British culture influenced the world through the empire. But, and I'm sad to say this as an Englishman, as a proud Englishman, but probably the reason that you, as someone from Saudi Arabia, speak English, and a lot of the reason that English dominates the world of commerce and the world of computers is not because of Great Britain, it's because of the United States of America. So for 2 lectures we're going to look at some of the history and culture, especially political culture, of the United States of America. Okay, so we know this course name, English, Thought and Culture. Today, lecture 9 is called George Washington and the American Declaration of Independence. There we are, that you know me, Jake Horgan. There's my email. Now, before we start the lecture, let's look at a few facts about the United States of America. So, the United States of America has got a population of 317 million people. This is the 3rd largest country in the world. You have China, you have India, and then you have the United States of America. It's by far the biggest English-speaking country in the world. Now, as we'll see, I think in lecture 11, when we look at India and the British Empire in India, we'll realise there's probably more English speakers in India than there are in the United States of America. But when it's first language, in terms of first language English speakers, the United States of America is the biggest English-speaking country in the world. It's the 4th largest country in the world by surface area. I have a plan to go to America over the summer, and I sometimes say, like say to a friend in the United States of America, I'll say, I'd like to come and see you. I'm in America. But he will joke with me that maybe it will take me 7 hours to fly from where I will be to where he will be. Like, for example, Albuquerque in New Mexico, where I plan to be, and where my friend is in New York, would be the same as flying from London in the UK, in the United Kingdom, to Istanbul in Turkey, all across Europe and into Asia. So America is a big, big country. It's big, it's long, but it's very, very wide. It is one of the world's most ethnically diverse and multicultural nations. People always joke that there are more Irish in New York than there are in Dublin. There are more Italians in New York than there are in Rome. They always say there are more Jewish people in New York than there are in Tel Aviv. There's one other that I've forgotten, but probably now it's even more so. It's even that's like the old days, but now you'll have Kosovans, you'll have people from Somalia, you'll have people from every nation, maybe Saudi people, Iraqi people, Syrian people. It's a very, very ethnically, in terms of different races, and culturally very diverse. It is the world's undisputed superpower. Now, when I was growing up, there were two great superpowers. There was the United States of America and there was the Soviet Union. But in the early 90s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the United States of America became the undisputed world superpower. No one can touch it in terms of its economic power and its military power. Though the economic power, if you read your news, is going down. And again, though it's sad to say as a British man, the power of the United States of America is the major reason for the global dominance of the English language, especially in terms of computers and the internet. If you might not know, but one of the major reasons for the importance of the English language is because it is the language of the internet and the language of computers. And that is mainly from the United States of America. Okay, we're just going to have a very brief overview of American history. We learn in school in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So in 1492 Christopher Columbus discovered the American continent. He wasn't meaning to. He was trying to find another way to get to India. You know, he's trying to find another way to get to India as opposed to going around Africa in that long way. He was trying to find a cheaper way, a more direct way, but he didn't realise there was this big lot of land between Europe and India or Asia, which was the American continent. Okay. Initially, he discovered the islands of what is now called the West Indies, because that's what they called them. Okay. But English settlement on the eastern coast of America began with the Virginia colony in 1607 and the Pilgrims' Plymouth colony in 1620. Now these were colonies of people that were fleeing, were running away from religious persecution. And so they went to America to start their own community. So Britain, increasingly when Britain, remember Britain, England became Great Britain in 1707. Britain battled with France over America and Canada. But Britain basically won. Britain established stronger colonies. They had many, many battles with France over America and especially Canada. But you'll know in a small area of Canada and in places like New Orleans, there is still a strong French influence, but mainly British culture sort of won the battle. The original people of America, the Indians, you might have seen them on films, were being conquered, being defeated in battle and displaced. They were being pushed off their land. the British colonies in America were committed to freedom and self-governance. You know, they wanted to be free of British rule. And in 1776, the United States of America declared independence from Britain. So, where does America come from? Where does the United States of America come from? Firstly, it was a British colony. It was part of the British Empire. And we'll see that they rebelled against Britain and formed their own country. Okay. Now to do this, so imagine you have all these colonies full of people that are ultimately British, mostly British in origin, but for various reasons they became angry with direct rule from Britain. They became angry with the King of Britain, King George III, and they became angry with the Parliament, the people of Britain. So they fought the American Revolutionary War. It's sometimes called the American War of Independence. And though other nations, especially the French, obviously the French tried to get involved to try and to strengthen their power, it was mainly fought between the Americans, what they called the American Patriots, the people that wanted a free America, and the British. And in 1783, the Treaty of Paris ended the war and recognized the new country of the United States in most of the present-day eastern United States. Now that's quite important. When America became independent, it wasn't all of America or all of the United States of America we now know. It was quite a narrow strip on the east side of the American continent. One of the main causes of the war was over taxation, as the British Empire was taxing the American colony to finance its European wars. And this is a very, very important part of American culture. They don't believe in big government. They don't believe in taxation. It's a very, very big thing. They don't believe in being taxed. Any government that starts to put the taxes up is in danger, because they fought a war. They became a country to stop taxation from the British Crown. Okay, let's look at this guy, George Washington. Obviously the capital of the United States of America is called Washington, D.C. It's named after him. There is a state in western the United States called Washington State, the capital of which is Seattle. So these are all named after this man, George Washington. He was born in 1731 and died in 1799. He was the first president of the United States. He was president from 1789 to 1797. He was also the commander-in-chief of the American Army during the Revolutionary War. So he was a hero of the Revolution. He is seen as a founding father of the USA. Basically, the United States of America has these 5 founding fathers, people that are seen as the ones that made the United States of America happen. And George Washington is one of those. He was from a very wealthy, land-owning background. So he was very wealthy. His family owned a lot of slaves. He owned a lot of land. He came from that background. Okay. So we're going to look at a particular document that these people that wanted to create a new state, the people of British origin who lived in America, who wanted to form their own country, they wrote a document and published a document in 1776, so in the middle of the War of Independence, and it was called the American Declaration of Independence. This was a document published by the Americans in 1776 while at war with the British. And this document declared America to be an independent state. It is said to contain some of the best known phrases in the English language. Me as an English person, this obviously we don't learn this in school, but some of the phrases from it I know because I've heard them so many times. We'll look at some of those phrases. It basically talks of the Americans' right to independence and their right to rebel against the British. So obviously as a British man, sometimes a little bit difficult to read this document because it's a very, very revolutionary, it's a very, very radical document. And sometimes when you see America saying that they're the policemen of the world and standing against terrorism and all these sorts of things, well, you have to realise that they were the ones that really said it was right to rebel against the government. And they used many sort of tactics of guerrilla warfare against the British. So it makes you think about history. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, again two more of the founding fathers of America, were important in writing the document. It condemns both the British King, George III, and the British people. So it condemns my forefathers. But it really is quite, it attacks the king in a very big way, and in that way it's a very radical document. Obviously the United States of America was very much anti the idea of monarchy, the idea of a king or a queen, and so from that time there's never been a king or queen of America. It's all based on democratically elected president who rules over the country only for a period of time, for 4 years and then for another 4 years. They're very, very much against the idea of a king or a family who rule through inheritance, and that's a key idea in American political culture. Okay, now before we start looking actually at the document, it's important to say that two thinkers that really influenced the people who wrote the American Declaration of Independence were John Locke, who we looked at in Lecture 3, and Adam Smith, who we looked at in Lecture 4. Their ideas of the rule of law, their ideas of economic freedom, their ideas of basically freedom against tyranny, these very much influenced the writers of the American Declaration of Independence. Whether John Locke or Adam Smith would have agreed with this is another question. But again, a lot of these ideas of English political culture, English political writing and economic writing were taken on by the Americans and in a way taken to a further extreme. And often British people, we joke about Americans that they're just very extreme. You know, British people are more conservative, more, you know, we like to do the middle way, to take things easy, while Americans tend to be much more extreme. And that's a little joke that we make between our two cultures. Now, this is the opening lines of the American Declaration of Independence. And this is one of those very, very famous lines. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is the famous second sentence of the Declaration. So, when we say we hold these truths to be self-evident, ultimately they're appealing to some sort of higher power, or also to reason, the idea of reason, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, they're given by God certain rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, now you remember lecture 3 about John Locke? You can hear a lot of John Locke in this, in these words. You know, the right to life, the right to liberty, freedom, the right to be able to pursue happiness in your life. You know, the idea of the individual. You've got to remember that we say that the 20th century was the century of the individual. But here now in the 18th century, they're basically saying that an individual has rights. This was a new idea, a very sort of radical, revolutionary idea. Right, now this next bit is where it gets really quite revolutionary. You realise that this document was something that really changed the atmosphere of the time. They write, Jefferson and Adams, that to secure these rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, saying that a government only has power as they are, you know, their power comes from the consent of the governed. So basically saying that it's democracy that gives right to a government. You know, that's a radical, that's a revolutionary idea now. But imagine nearly 250 years ago, this was an explosive idea. So, and it says that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, you know, it's standing against people's rights, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. So it's basically, and to institute new government. So it's basically saying, this document is saying that, you know, any government which the people, well, they're saying, well, don't like, that the people have a right to rise up and change that government. This is a very, very revolutionary document, and again, if America is ordering people to do this and do that in the world, it's sometimes good to look at what they said when they rose up against the British. Maybe that's from a perspective of a British man, but it's good to look at how radical this document was, you know. And obviously this This document came out in 1776. Obviously in 1789, as we read about when we looked at the Tale of Two Cities, there was the French Revolution. And I think some of the ideas that were expressed in this document, and the fact that those ideas were victorious, you know, obviously America did become independent, this inspired revolutionaries throughout the world, and especially in Europe. So to a certain extent we can see the French Revolution was the fruit of this document. Okay, now this is where, as a British man, I get a little bit defensive, because here the document famously turns against King George III. And it says, the history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations of the rights of the people, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny. Remember, Locke's words against tyranny. They're using Locke's words here to the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states, over the United States of America. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid word. The Declaration's words against King George III. Now, in a sense, in the 18th century, Britain believed that a king should rule with his people, should rule with Parliament that represented the landed people and the rich people of the land, and that there should be some sort of agreement between them, there should be some sort of understanding between them. But it still believed that a king was a king and you had to be obeyed. Now this idea that these colonials, these people in America were saying such things about the king, you know, got the British very angry, and obviously the British fought to maintain the king's rule in the United States of America. Of course, the British lost, and obviously history went a different way. But not only do they actually condemn the king, they condemn the British people. It says, nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature, the place that makes laws, legislature, which is Parliament, Houses of Parliament, to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. So again, the Americans are saying, we've warned you, we've warned your Parliament, what you're trying to do is impose a tyranny over us that's just not acceptable. So there is the Declaration's words against the British Parliament and people. And then finally, this is like the sort of the end of it. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions. So here they're basically appealing to God for their rightness, but also because traditionally appealing to God was all about the divine right of kings. You know, when you appeal to God, it was all about God created kings, created queens, created government by monarchy. But now, this is very radical, this is very revolutionary. The Americans are appealing to God for in a sense, the rights of the people. Very different idea, and again a bit taken from John Locke. And by the authority of the good people of these colonies, so they're saying the authority is in the people, declare that these united colonies are free and independent states, that they are absolved, cut off from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, finished, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. So they're basically saying we are now an independent state. We're appealing to God, but more so you're appealing to the rights of the people, which was a new and radical and revolutionary idea, which once released was very, very difficult to push back. So one can see that a lot of the events that occurred after this, the French Revolution and the 19th century age of revolutions, there were many, many revolutions in Germany, or what became Germany, France again, in fact even in Spain, in the Carlist sort of uprising. There were attempts in the UK. A lot of this sort of revolutionary momentum came from what happened in the United States of America. And so this is a very, very important document in not only the history of the English-speaking world, but in the history of the world. Good. So I hope I've given you a flavour of why America became America. And obviously at the beginning of America you had very much a country that was dominated by English speakers, people from Great Britain. Increasingly, as it developed, it became more multicultural, and there all sorts of different influences came in. Germanic influences, Spanish influences, a lot of the people of Jewish origin came, and obviously we'll see later people of African origin as well. So, and that created a very, very multicultural nation. But initially, you've always got to remember, America was a British colony founded by people of British origin. Okay. Okay. Final thoughts. I hope you can see that Britain and the United States of America are two separate countries with a history of conflict. You know, we fought this war. In fact, we'll see in the next lecture, we fought a second war with the United States of America. And so there's always been a little bit of tension between us. But also, despite this history of conflict, we have become friends. Generally, we understand each other. We speak the same language. You know, we have a lot of things we share in common. But though we have the same language, we have very, very different cultures. Often an American and a British person will speak together, and they'll be using words that we both understand, but we'll have different meanings to those words, and there can often be cultural misunderstandings between us. We tend to respect each other. I think Americans respect us for our history, for certain elements of our culture, and we respect them for what they've achieved, for some of the great things that Americans have done in modern history. We respect each other, but we also mock each other. And hopefully in this lecture I haven't been mocking Americans too much, but we tend to make a lot of jokes about one another. Okay, so that's the end of lecture 9, but we'll carry on in lecture 10 looking at this whole area of the culture of the United States of America. Thank you very much.